This is the Capitol Rundown.
All of the things that we do to help support students reach their full potential are in jeopardy.
The United States of America is going to take back a lot of what was stolen from it by other countries.
They can raise the money to start their businesses here so they can stay and keep their headquarters in Michigan. So we don't have that pipeline of ambitious people, students leaving Michigan.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now. Good morning and thanks for joining us on the Capitol Rundown. I'm Siobhan Klepfer. We begin with telephone town halls growing in popularity. After hosting in-person town halls that drew dozens of angry and concerned voters over federal cuts by the Trump administration, Republican lawmakers are now engaging with constituents over the phone, or they've stopped hosting town halls altogether. And that includes here in Michigan. Last Friday, protesters demanded that Congressman Bill Huizenga host an in-person one as they demonstrated outside of his office in Holland. He did end up having one by phone. The congressman said the protests were, quote, funded and organized by outside partisans, end quote, an opinion shared by the Trump administration and other Republican leaders like Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Another Michigan Republican, Congressman Tom Barrett, held a telephone town hall. This one took place on Monday. He discussed a wide variety of issues, including federal spending, infrastructure, and the need to renew tax cuts from President Trump's first term. But many people took to social media and reached out to us, saying they never got any instructions on how to call in, even though they claim they signed up to take part in the event. On Tuesday, the congressman's office issued a statement about the complaints, saying there was a technical problem. The statement said more than 1,800 people listened in on the call, and it was a, quote, robust and respectful conversation. It went on to say that, quote, our office is aware of an error that prevented some folks from participating. We are investigating the cause to make sure it doesn't happen again, end quote. The congressman's office says another town hall is in the works. Well, coming up, we'll have the results of a new poll that sheds some light on what Michiganders are thinking when it comes to the governor's race. We'll be right back. Welcome back. A new poll is giving us a look at the 2026 Michigan gubernatorial race. According to a survey conducted by MERS and Target Insight, Democratic candidate Jocelyn Benson is doing pretty well so far. In a possible matchup between Benson, who is the current Secretary of State, Republican Congressman John James, and Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who is running as an independent, 42% of respondents say they would pick Benson. James picked up 30% of the vote, while Duggan had 21%. The sample size was 600 people, and the margin of error is plus or minus 4%. When looking at a hypothetical Democratic primary race, Benson also leads with 55% of 344 respondents. Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist has 12%, as does Attorney General Dana Nessel. Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson got 3%. However, 19% of people chose undecided or another candidate. The margin of error is plus or minus 5.7%. Part of Benson's early showing could be the amount of money her campaign has taken in. On Monday, the campaign sent out a news release saying it has raised almost $2 million from more than 14,000 individual donors. Well, speaking of the lieutenant governor, he is now officially running for the top office. He made the announcement on Tuesday, and he says if he wins, he'll focus on expanding affordable housing and improving access to mental health care. Here's Jack Springate with more.
He's held conversations with Michiganders in all 83 counties as lieutenant governor, listening to what matters most to voters across the state.
I pushed hundreds of millions of dollars into our state's housing trust fund that has now brought 60,000 new housing units online since I took office. I've helped to not only remove the disparities in COVID outcomes, but also to bring more mental health services, because every parent I talk to is worried about their kids' mental health during these times.
He also launched the Michigan Innovation Fund to support startup companies and to keep them here.
Now people with ideas, they can raise the money to start their businesses here so they can stay and keep their headquarters in Michigan. So we don't have that pipeline of ambitious people, students leaving Michigan.
He says he's already delivered results while collaborating with Republicans in Michigan, and he says he'll stand up to the ones in Washington to protect our interests at home.
The second Trump administration is objectively more destructive than the first, and I'm going to play the role to make sure that I can protect and promote and advance the interests of the state of Michigan.
Well, as the race for the governor's chair gets crowded, our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic has some thoughts on where it's going next. He spoke with the Rundown's Megan Vaselli about that and what's happening with Michigan road funding.
It's time to get updated politically, and who better than Tim Skubic. Tim, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist is the latest to join the race to become Michigan's next governor. What are his advantages heading into this? And even if she's not endorsing candidates, does his connection with Governor Gretchen Whitmer make a difference either way?
Yeah, those are all very good questions. Let's take a look at this. First, there were two. Now there are three Democrats running for governor. Jocelyn Benson was the first one in the water, quickly followed by Chris Swanson, the sheriff out of Genesee County. And now the guy who is second, a heartbeat away from being governor of Michigan, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, the Deuce. The lieutenant governor does start out not as the front runner. In fact, he's a distinct underdog in this race because here's the problem with lieutenant governors. You're serving under the person who is governor, who gobbles up and just sucks in most of the media attention and the public attention, and you're the second banana. And so you dutifully do what you need to do. And Mr. Gilchrist has been, described by the governor as a great partner and a great leader, although he's already getting criticism from the House Speaker Matt Hall, who basically said he's not even a player in Lansing. And of course, the LG disagrees with that immensely. But it's an uphill fight. Now, could this be different? It certainly could. With his base in Detroit, that could provide a lot of votes for him. So he's certainly not being ruled out. But he is not the leader at this juncture, and we'll see how this race plays out. And my guess is it'll be three, and there'll be more before this is all over. So stay tuned.
All right, Tim, thank you. And as always, the debate over how to pay for Michigan's road work continues. What's the latest on that?
Well, we do have some progress that's being made. The governor and Mr. Hall, the aforementioned Speaker of the House, they have agreed on some elements of the package. For example, they want to raise $3 billion. They both agree that $1 billion of that would go to fix local potholes. Under the governor's previous bonding proposal, all of that money went to state highways. Locals got absolutely zippo. So $1 million is already earmarked for local roads if they pass the package. They also agreed that the 6% sales tax, which is now collected at the pump, that money goes to schools and local governments. They both agree all of that money should go into the roads. And that's a good piece of loose change, which gets them another $1 million. And they also don't agree on a very important point. The governor says we need new revenue, code tax increase. Mr. Hall says, no, we don't. We can do it with the existing state budget by making cuts. And they have agreed to make $500 million in unspecified cuts. But the governor's still holding fast on the tax increase. The speaker's still holding fast on saying no. And whether the twain can meet is the huge question mark in order to get them to that $3 billion road fix number.
Well, coming up, we are looking at cuts to the federal education department and reaction here in Michigan. That and much more still to come. Welcome back. The Trump administration has started dismantling the Department of Education, laying off nearly half its workforce on Tuesday night. Shutting the agency down was a campaign goal of President Donald Trump, who continues his efforts to cut down the size of the federal government. Washington correspondent Trevor Shirley is in D.C. with more.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon says these layoffs are the first step towards shuttering the entire agency.
By Wednesday of this week, the Education Department laid off almost half its workforce, around 1,300 staffers, leaving around 2,100 employees remaining.
I feel very badly, but many of them don't work at all. Many of them never showed up to work. Many of them never showed up to work.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon says the layoffs are aimed at eliminating what she described as bureaucratic bloat.
She cut a large number, but she kept the best people. And we'll see how it all works out.
Administration officials say the cuts won't impact state funding, help for students with disabilities, or free application for federal student aid, FAFSA forms, what many high school seniors rely on to get federal help for college. But critics disagree.
All of the things that we do to help support students reach their full potential are in jeopardy.
They say draconian cuts will be devastating.
They want to wipe out these programs that have provided the protections for every single family in our country.
Supporters in Congress, however, say an education overhaul is long overdue.
My hope is it'll make it easier to get it out, but the funding ought to go directly to local school districts, parents who have IDEA plans. That would be my hope.
The White House says shutting down the department puts education back in the hands of the states, but to completely eliminate the agency would take an act of Congress. Reporting in Washington, I'm Trevor Shirley.
Here in Michigan, state officials are reacting to the cuts at the Education Department, and that includes State Attorney General Dana Nessel. AG Nessel joined a lawsuit on Thursday along with 21 other states in the District of Columbia to stop the Trump administration from dismantling the department. The lawsuit claims the cuts will mean a loss or delay of federal money for public schools. Also, the agency would not be able to enforce civil rights laws in schools, among other problems. On Tuesday, State Superintendent Michael Rice issued a statement. He says in part that, quote, today's action is an outrage. These staffing cuts will ultimately harm those vulnerable children, including students with disabilities, poor children, children experiencing homelessness, and English learners, among others. Just 3 days before the federal government shutdown deadline, Congress got one step closer to passing a resolution on Tuesday to keep the government funded through September. Here's our Washington correspondent Hannah Brandt with the details.
Today, the House narrowly passed a spending bill, but it didn't come without a fight.
We did our job today.
House Speaker Mike Johnson celebrated the passage of a short-term spending bill to keep the government funded through September. It includes a $6 billion boost to defense spending and shrinks non-defense spending by $13 billion. Relatively small adjustments to the overall top line of $1.7 trillion.
It freezes funding. It's a responsible thing to do.
Pressure from President Trump was key in getting Republicans on board.
He is the difference maker. I would never support this language, but I do trust Donald Trump.
And Republicans say this gives the Trump administration time to come up with a 2026 budget that makes bigger spending cuts.
This CR will allow government to continue operating, and it will allow DOJ to continue finding that waste, fraud, and abuse.
House Democratic leaders say that's exactly why their members opposed the bill.
We're not going to sign a blank check to the chaos and corruption coming out of the White House.
And they expressed concerns about what Republicans will do next.
Use this bill, this vehicle, to cut Social Security, to cut Medicaid, to cut the VA, and hand the cash to the rich.
But Speaker Johnson argues they have no plans to touch Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare.
They've been lying and misrepresenting the facts about what's in the bill, and the American people can read it for themselves.
Now the bill goes over to the Senate, where it will need bipartisan support to pass and to avoid the Friday shutdown deadline. In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Just ahead, we'll have a report on the effects the battle over tariffs will have on your wallet. The Capitol Rundown. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Turning to the White House now, both Canada and the European Union announced their own tariffs in response to President Donald Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. These countermeasures will cover goods from the U.S. worth billions of dollars. Our Washington correspondent Basil John reports on the tariff troubles.
With President Donald Trump's tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports increased to 25%.
The United States of America is going to take back a lot of what was stolen from it by other countries.
Canada announced retaliatory tariffs of more than $20 billion.
If the U.S. can do this to us, their closest friend and ally, then nobody is safe.
These target U.S. goods, including computers, sports equipment, and water heaters.
We are living through one of the most serious moments in the history of Canada. Today,
the European Union also announced its own countermeasures worth around $28 billion on not just steel and aluminum, but also textiles, home appliances, motorcycles, bourbon, and peanut butter.
This matches the economic scope of the tariffs of the United States.
President Trump says the EU tariffs will not go unanswered.
Of course I'm going to respond.
Several of the products targeted in these tariffs are produced by red states. But Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer worries this will hurt the economy at large.
Forecasters say that thanks to Donald Trump's chaos and tariffs, the odds of a dreaded recession have started to crawl up.
Canada's tariffs will go into effect on March 13th, while the EU's will start on April 1st and fully kick in on April 13th.
We will always remain open to negotiations.
Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
Monday is St. Patrick's Day, and the White House held an annual tradition this week, but the meeting between President Trump and Ireland's Prime Minister was not business as usual. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Monday is St. Patrick's Day, and the traditional welcoming of Ireland's leader to the White House happened on Wednesday. President Trump hosted Prime Minister Michael Martin, but it hit a diplomatic snag, something that's becoming more common in the White House. President Trump said Ireland is on the list of countries that he says are taking advantage of the United States. The Prime Minister countered by noting Ireland's contributions to the U.S.
EU was set up in order to take advantage of the United States.
Including Ireland? Is Ireland taking advantage of the U.S.?
Of course they are. I can't, I have great respect for Ireland and what they did, and they should have done just what they did. But the United States shouldn't have let it happen. We had stupid leaders. We had leaders that didn't have a clue.
He was referring to the concentration of U.S. pharmaceutical companies in Ireland because of the country's tax policies.
I mean, what I would say, President, if I could, 1 second, just make the point. It's a two-way street too, and we are investing a lot more in America now. And people may not realise, but Ryanair, one of our biggest airlines, for example, AirCap, they buy more. The two of them together buy more Boeing airplanes than anybody else outside of America.
Martin returned to the White House in the evening and presented Mr. Trump with a bowl of shamrocks at an early St. Patrick's Day celebration. The two leaders also attended an annual luncheon at the Capitol. This was President Trump's first Oval Office meeting with a foreign leader since his recent sit-down with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That turned into a shouting match over ending Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We will see you all again right here next week.